I think Fran has an announcement for next month. Oh. Yes, that would help. Fran has an hi, everybody. Fran has an announcement for next month.
Oh, you have it.
I have it.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see everybody again. Our next book is going to be The German House by Annette Hess in December. The discussion leaders are Steve Zavar and Donna Spector.
Thank you.
Why is it?
Turn it over to you.
I was gonna go up.
Oh, okay, because you're close.
And also because it's a lot.
Yeah. We'll be here.
My glasses, I can see. I can.
And I'm gonna take this off when I'm at the mic. Nobody can hear, understand me.
All right, we'll turn it. Bonnie, who are our leaders this month.
Let's have
Can you
something.
hear me?
I can take a book.
Lowdown, yes, okay. I'm going to give a little bit of biography about Jennifer Weiner. She was born in Louisiana in 1970. She's about 51 now, to a Jewish family on an army base where her dad was stationed as an army physician psychiatrist. She then moved to Connecticut, where she grew up with a younger sister and two brothers. When she was 16, her parents divorced, and her father essentially abandoned the family, although he did continue child support. He died of a crack cocaine overdose in 2008. Her mother came out lesbian at age 55 and did find her life partner. Her mother died recently, just after this book was published. Her education, the author said she was one of only 9 Jewish students in her Connecticut high school class of 400, and she was its graduation speaker in 1987. Note, this was the same year Hal and Danny graduated from Emlyn Prep School. She entered Princeton University at age 17, graduating summa cum laude in 1991 with a degree in English, with teachers like Toni Morrison and Joyce Carol Oates, and with a degree in women's studies. She then trained in journalism so she could get a job. She later said this taught her to write concisely and to meet deadlines. Her first published story appeared in Seven magazine in 1992, a year after graduating college. Her second published short story appeared in 1993 in Redbook magazine. Her works have also appeared in Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Elle, Allure, Ladies' Home Journal, Good Housekeeping, and Time. Note that except for Time, they are all considered women's magazines. She worked for newspapers as a columnist or feature writer in State College, Pennsylvania, which is where Penn State is, in Lexington, Kentucky, and in Philadelphia, PA for the Philadelphia Inquirer. She has written essays for the New York Times, such as Mean Girls in the Retirement Home and Another Thing to Hate About Ourselves. Her first novel, Good in Bed, was published in 2001. In Her Shoes became a movie in 2005 with Cameron Diaz, Toni Collette, and Shirley MacLaine as their grandmother. She has written a total of 15 best-selling novels, as well as short stories, essays, and 2 middle school books about Little Bigfoot. She also wrote a TV pilot for a half-hour sitcom called The Great State of Georgia, about plus-sized women, and it aired 12 episodes in 2011. She used this experience in her novel, The Next Best Thing, where she showed how the writer's vision gets distorted and changed by all the people involved in a TV show. She was also an actress briefly in TV shows in 2005, 2006, 2011. She appeared in TV interviews for the Today Show, Good Morning America, and CBS Sunday Morning. She's big on Facebook and Twitter. Forbes magazine put her on their list of 25 working moms to follow on Twitter, saying tune in for latest stories of brilliant. She uses her social platform to encourage women's leadership, self-esteem, and body positivity. She also has a lot to say about male versus women authors. When men write about families or about feelings, it is literature. When women write those things, it is chick lit and reviewed that way. More life information. She married an attorney in 2001, had 2 daughters in 2003 and 2007, and divorced in 2010. She remarried Bill Sykin in 2016. She has lived in Philadelphia and on Philadelphia's main line, like Hal and Daisy, and has a vacation home on Cape Cod. This book was started and finished during the pandemic. Oldest daughter getting ready for college. This is the author's thoughts and fears about choices and obstacles that are still the same for women of each generation. How do we change this? Also wanted to talk about privilege, about gender, about what justice looks like and what forgiveness looks like, and what ultimately is going to take for these men to rejoin polite society again. Authors don't choose our subjects choose us. As a woman, as the mother of daughters, including one who will be starting college in the fall, I've been thinking a lot about the Me Too movement, about how many women have survived various traumas, how those traumas have shaped their lives, and how we as a society still have not figured out what justice looks like, or how men are supposed to atone for the damage they have done. This book is about violence, pain, and privilege, about a class of men who are told the world is theirs for the taking, and the women aren't quite people, more like things to be treated or discarded at their men's whims. I'm sure there are survivors who think, why should I ever come forward? No one's going to believe me. And even if they do, powerful men always find ways to get off the hook. The system is rigged.
No, because it's not coming up.
Okay.
I don't know if they can hear. I don't know anything.
Please mute yourself, everybody.
Oh, sorry.
You gonna start with Hal?
Oh, I guess.
Or-
Okay, does anybody need some questions? We even have some extra copies if anyone needs. Okay, great. First, I want to say that there will be a lot of spoilers in this because really there was a lot of preliminary information. It really didn't get to the main discussion points till later in the book. So I hope you're all okay with that. Jennifer Weiner has said she, quote, hopes the characters feel like women you know. So we're going to discuss all the characters first, the men first. Do you want to read the first? We'll start with Hal.
Now, he's not an,
Take it.
that's a good idea. Hal is not a main character, but he's central. He's a central character. Why? Anyone want to answer that?
Unbelievable. Because she didn't let me in. She got on it another way illegally.
Mute, please.
Just don't want that thing taking up space in my thing recording.
Well, except for, what is it, daughter, everybody knows him and the story revolves around him and what he has done.
It's Nancy's iPad so that I can't see.
Nancy, mute yourself, please.
Sorry, okay.
He's the rapist, so obviously the story revolves around him.
Also, in the information that I just read, where they talk about it's a man's world, Hal's personality certainly epitomizes that whole atmosphere. He definitely feels like he's privileged, and kind of everybody's supposed to bow down to his wishes, especially, of course, Daisy. Also Beatrice, but he gets a lot of backflash there. She doesn't kowtow. She doesn't kowtow to anyone, in fact. So that's one reason why he's a central character. He certainly is a central character. Should I just read the next question? Why did Hal feel a sense of privilege and entitlement as a child, young adult? How is social class portrayed in the novel? Anybody? I can get him.
He came from a privileged family. He was the apple of his father's eye and, was treated very well. He was quite popular as a young adult. I think wasn't he president of his class? And as an adult, he was a successful lawyer. So he achieved that sort of success. And he was used to having his wishes obeyed and his statements followed.
Anyone else?
Can I suggest that you be forthright? Don't just raise your hand, say something so the people with the mic know you want to talk.
I found her. I'm good. You might as well sit down. Why should you?
I think because of this is why he became so controlling. Also, I don't know, I'm trying to remember if we put the questions later. His privilege was not only that he himself was a natural leader and he felt he had the right answers to everything. His daughter wanted to go to public school. His daughter wanted to be creative. Don't be ridiculous. This is the schools you're going to go to. These are the fields you're going to be in. When later on, her mother said, well, you should go to college anyway. Even you can do liberal arts, but you really should go to college. Hal said under his breath, not on my dime, if you remember. I mean, everything. He felt he should control everything. But talk about Emlyn and what they were talking about there, his prep school. The alumni there wrote him the letters to get into, was it Yale? It was some Ivy League school, and into law school, and into the law firm he eventually got to. The alumni wrote all the letters, all the recommendations, moved him right along. As far as privilege, even the house he lived in had been his father's. He did have to pay his brother half the value of the house because the father sort of left it or divided it among them, but he got this gorgeous mansion for half the price. So he moved right along in privilege. Okay.
Does anybody else want to say anything?
Harriet does.
Harriet's
You're
first.
muted.
It was his privilege and his control
All right, Harriet's talking.
because he got his wife to change her name. I mean, who changes their name? What was wrong with Diane? And he wanted to call her Daisy because when he called her Diane, it reminded him of the rape that he had committed earlier. And she never questioned it. It was sort of, Daisy grew up wanting to do better. Her mother wanted her to do better, and she just figured that she's marrying this older man and she should do what he says because he knows better than she does. So everybody around Hal let him be privileged.
Harriet?
It's pretty commonplace that if you go to an Ivy school or even a prep school, that is an esteemed prep school, which means it's expensive usually. What happens is those kids create a network. For example, one of my kids went to an Ivy school. The reason I'm bringing that up is he said more than just the education he got there, it's the networking that happens there. Down the road, even if you don't give to the school, give back to the school and become an active alumni, or even be part, they're part of the interviewing process, the alumni. It's like, what can you contribute to the school? And then the school rewards you by this networking. That's what goes on. And if you look at most of our leadership, other than Biden, most of our national leadership, they all come from Exeter, and then later they come from, Ivy schools, either Yale or Harvard. It's almost a requirement. And they're all knowing each other. And at each step in their careers, able to lean on each other. It's a network. That's the way it is.
How does Hal manipulate others? Danny, Brad, Diana, Daisy, and Beatrice. What he says goes. He controls the purse strings, he has the power, and so he's able to control, especially his wife and his daughter when she's young, but not as she becomes a teenager.
Going back to the why did he marry Daisy question, which has to do with that also, he picked her. He was like ready to get married. She was young. She was manipulable, if that's a word. I have an acquaintance who picked his wife that way, and I watched the son do the same thing, and it's really nauseating. And it's only as she got older that it occurred to her that it had even happened. So she was prime pick. And he spent his whole life doing that. I love the character of Beatrice, which we will get to, I suppose, because she was the only one who stood up to him.
Does anybody think he changed since Lieutenant question? Sorry. Okay. Are we going to go back to 3?
Whichever you want.
Okay. Why we talked about why Hal chose Daisy to marry. How did he see his marriage? Was he faithful? Was he a good husband? What's a good husband?
I think he was faithful and he thought he was a good husband. Would I have thought he was a good husband? Never, and I would never marry that type of personality, but different women want and men want different things and they have different needs. He gave her everything he wanted. She had all the money she wanted. She could have her little cooking thing and all, and he was fine with that. Was Daisy happy? I don't think so, but whatever. Yeah.
He didn't get Daisy at all. He didn't get when she was upset. He did not get when she really didn't agree or when she was passively giving in. He didn't understand her. He didn't care to understand her. He wanted the smooth facade of perfection, which was not at all perfection.
Well said.
Okay, we're bouncing around the questions, which is fine, but okay, how did he manipulate? Okay, what were Hal's opinions of the Me Too movement? Did they match his dad, Burnens? Do you remember him? He was almost comic relief. He was so over the top. And why? Anyone want to answer that? What was Hal saying about when all about sex and gender and some of the famous people who got caught in the net?
He said, me too.
Oh, thank you.
Well, unfortunately, he's typical of the men that we're finding in the Me Too movement. Me Too doesn't mean me, it means you, and that's just the way it is. That's men will be men, boys will be boys. And until that is broken, we're never going to get anywhere with this. You know, we can have guys, you know, accused every couple of years and everyone, oh, thank goodness it's done, but it's really not, because he hasn't learned. And that goes back to, I think, the question, do we think he did change after? We don't have enough knowledge to know whether or not he did change. My feelings are he probably didn't, because he couldn't see what he did. It was like, yeah, she asked for it, she didn't want it, or, you know, I mean, he really couldn't understand what women were saying or what meant to them. So it's probably never going to change, in my opinion, which is pretty depressing, until women of this generation start really training our boys and telling them this is not acceptable. So
I disagree. I think he knew what he did. That's why he changed her name to Daisy. That's why he didn't want anything to do with the name Diane. He knew what he did. He knew it was wrong. Whether he would repeat it or not, that's a different story. But he actually did know that.
Did anybody think that maybe part of the reason why he drank was to maybe forget? Remember one of the cohorts, I forget his name offhand, also had a drinking problem and had regrets and had a disorganized life, and he really couldn't coalesce his life. I mean,
First, I'd like to say that I think that Hal didn't have conscience, because if he had a conscience, he would have made an effort to change. Danny where I need to get married, I have to find someone to play my wife. I already have the house. I need someone to furnish this dollhouse. I need characters for my script. And his actions with his business associates and other people from alumni groups were there for him to impress and manipulate. Not our favorite character in the book, for sure.
I agree that he was trying to do a script. When he married Daisy, she was an innocent. And here he thought, I'm going to take this innocent that's going to be a good wife. She's a good cook. She'll entertain my business partners. She looks up to me, that she might be easy to control, that he had it planned out that way. I don't think he knew what to do with his daughter, because she didn't fit the mold. She was the first one that really was willing to go against him. And she should have been the one with the least power. And she was trying to show that she wasn't going to give in. So Hal is just not a nice man, very self-centered, knowing what he wants to do.
Getting back to you, Libby, if he had a conscience or not, I don't know, but I think he rationalized things to his advantage, and this is how he lived his life. If it suited him, fine. If it didn't, onward and upward. And his daughter, his wife, you know, they're there. That's it. He's into his buddies, his law, and that's that.
I think it's
Okay, there we go.
Just talk to them for a minute. The connection here is obviously not really good, so we've been going in and out, and I apologize, but
Well, they say it goes black. They hear, but they're
Okay, and the second really has to do with Danny trying to atone. I do want to say, of the three people involved, and those are the first three on the list, Hal, the main one, of course, Danny and Brad, who was called Tubbs, Bub, something like that. And she was Diane, she really didn't know any of his friends, and she only knew him, Hal, as Poe. She didn't know anything about really any of them except what school they graduated from. Hal dealt with the rape by thank you. He put it in a little compartment, tucked it away, forgot about it. Danny did good works, as you can see in the second question under Danny. He became a saint. He was trying to atone. And Brad, the third one, he turned completely to alcohol. You know, just three different ways of dealing with that situation. So let's talk about Danny. What did you think about Danny? Did your feelings about him change as time went on? What are your feelings about Danny?
I think Danny was a decent guy. He was trying to fit in high school. He was the one that was gay, and he was trying to get Hal's attention, and he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be involved with this, but he was. And after that, he did what he could. I mean, he tried to tell Diana, the sister, don't. Well, I'm not saying he did, but he did try to tell his sister, don't marry him. But, you know, if she's in love with him, what can you do? What can you say? And how he led his life, I think he's a decent, good person.
Danny was gay at a time when you couldn't be gay. And he was tortured. And I think he was tortured his entire life. I don't think he did all he could. I think he could have been forthright with his sister. And I think he should have been. He did go to his mother, who was totally useless. But I remember growing up at that time, and the common statement was, you can fall in love with a rich person as well as a poor person, and you're all shaking your head, so you all heard it. I didn't follow through, unfortunately. No, Phil's a good guy. But Danny, I think, did the best he could at his time, but he never got over it. He was tortured forever, and that's just sad. It was nice at the end. Maybe it was just put in there for, you know, to make us feel good, but that he eventually did get back with his sister.
Out of the three of them, Danny had the strongest moral code, but he didn't have the strength to live up to it or to stand up to Hal. And he atoned, but he didn't have the strength to warn his sister. He was missing something. His gayness at the time probably had a fair amount to do with it. So I guess he's almost the tragic figure in the story when you think about it. Well, Brad, in a different way. Brad just completely collapsed. I mean, he was like, "Hey, look at me, I'm doing it." He didn't think two figs about it, and then afterwards, he started to feel guilt. He couldn't deal with what had happened and what he had done, but he didn't feel the I guess the limitation that Danny did. At least that's the way I felt about it.
Yeah. Okay. I like the way Jennifer Weiner gave each person, no matter what their character was, she gave them reasons for it. Danny had reasons that he was
in love with Hal. So he didn't want to do anything that would cast him in a negative light. So that's why he went along. He knew it was wrong to begin with, and he didn't want to be there, but he didn't want to disappoint Hal, the great Hal.
Yeah. And Brad, he in the section where Diana went to his house, his apartment, we learned Brad felt like an outsider from very early on. His older brothers who had gone to Emlyn were great, and he was a schlub. I really wrote that in my margin. I wrote, he's a schlub. And he just wanted to go along and be part of the popular Hal. What Hal said it, that's fine with me. But he really sunk in deep into alcoholism. And when Diana went to his house, if you remember, his first words are you a process server? It had been in his mind all along. One of the questions later is, how does Diana feel after she leaves his apartment? And she feels lighter. She feels like a little bit more of closure, and then it changes. Remember why?
Yeah. She's very upset. She thinks it's her fault, but it's not.
Because a few days later, he did shoot himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then she feels guilt. She does feel it's her fault. Do you think it was her fault? Yes, no, see heads?
No.
I don't know.
If you're on Zoom and you want to speak, just unmute yourself and go ahead and say your name or something, and we'll hear you.
She was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. And getting back to the moral code idea, he was afraid of being caught. He was afraid of people's opinions, of people looking at him askance. And it ate at him. And over the years, he just failed at everything. And when Diana came in, I don't think she was the cause of it directly. What he did was, and the fact that she came and confronted him was the straw that broke the camel's back, because he had to face what he had done to somebody.
Okay, we ready to go to Beatrice? Anything else about? Okay. Beatrice, one of the reviewers said Beatrice was there for comic relief, like in a play. I don't know how you feel about that. Okay. How would you describe Beatrice? How would Beatrice describe her mom, Daisy? How would she describe her dad, Hal? How did everybody else see Beatrice?
He neglected her. He was not an attentive father. And I don't think that she had very much respect for the mother, seeing her being molded and put down by him.
Yeah, I think she was the voice of truth. She saw things as they were. The next few questions really all go together. How did you feel about her actions writing rapist on the dorm room door in the first private? That was Emlyn, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Emlyn. It became co-ed. So she went to Emlyn even though she didn't want to. Her grades were very mediocre because she was spending more time creating crafts that she got $100 per little figure that she did. How do you feel about her writing rapist on the dorm room door?
Well, I think that
I heard a good for her.
yeah, I think she was just part of the new generation. She was part of the Me Too generation, and she wasn't going to stand up for that. So it showed the difference between her and her mother's generation. And another thing about her is at a relatively young age, she didn't really care what anybody thought about her. I mean, she dressed differently. She had this kind of odd hobby. She kept these dead mice in the refrigerator. No, but I think that she was in tune with the new generation of women who was not going to stand for something like that.
I think what bothered her a lot about her mother is that she didn't finish college. And nobody encouraged her to finish college, including her husband. She couldn't understand that. I mean, go back to school, get your degree, get a job more than just cooking. That really bothered her.
I didn't see her as comic relief. I saw her as a really necessary character who, as you said, Diana, about the truth, I mean, she saw what was going on and she called them on it. And as far as her dress or whatever, that was her expressing herself, her costume. And the relationships that she had were based on what she wanted. With Cade, with the kid at the end who wanted her to join the beach party, which sent shivers up and down my spine because I like right away my radar went up and thought, oh God, not you. But I thought she was a totally fantastic, believable character and really necessary to the progress of the story. Anybody on Zoom?
To me, Beatrice was the only one who was well-rounded, had multiple sides to her. Everybody else was very one-sided and, you know, black and white. She was all the shades of gray. I thought she was a real person.
Okay, the other questions go together. How did she handle her relationship with fellow student Cade? If you remember, he was one of the popular kids, and he tells her later that he was basically dared to invite her to their lunch table and to go out with her. They were going to pay him to do it. But he found he really liked her. His comment was, I think you are so brave, and all the others, if they want to rebel and be different, they're all different in the same way. You are unique. You are amazing. Except he couldn't continue the relationship. My feeling, and I'm answering the question, sorry, is that he was too concerned with what his peers would think about him. So he couldn't bring their relationship in public. And she told him, well, if you can't kiss me in public, you know, then there's nothing here. Let me know when you can make this public. And of course, he never did. But how did you feel about Cade? Because one of his questions to her was, what happened when you were kicked out of that first school? I really want to understand it. And I think he really did. Did you feel that way? I see some nods. Okay, so Cade was, yes.
I felt that he, I felt that, yes, he really did care about her, but conforming was much more important. You know, towing the line of what's expected of them and being in the in crowd, or the, you know, the way his peers saw him was obviously something he couldn't deviate from. So he didn't have a strong personality, regardless of him recognizing her uniqueness and being attracted to her.
Okay. The last one is, what do you feel about her opinions on the Me Too movement? I mean, again, she said it like it is. One of the few who did. The next section in here just compares this to the Dollhouse, and this book is, I feel, written like in play form. There are 5 parts, and they each form the structure of the play. The first part 1 is the 2 Dianas, where we meet the 2 characters, told mostly from Daisy's point of view. Part 2, by the way, I didn't see all this, and I don't think Bonnie did either till we read it the second time. So the second part 2 is called Our Lady of Safe Harbor. That was the name of the church that became the restaurant, the Abbey. And the restaurant, this becomes the safe harbor that helps start Diana's healing progress. And we see examples of several other wash ashores. A lot of the people who worked at that restaurant had issues, and they used that place as a safe harbor. So that was that part of the book. Part 3, Little Bird. It comes from The Doll's House, where even if you never read it in high school, Ibsen's Dollhouse, Nora, the main character, is treated as a little bird. And one of the things Hal says something about, Daisy and Beatrice, you're my little birds that I keep safe in the nest. I mean, they pounded you on the head with that one. Where in that play, Dervahl treats his wife like Daisy is treated. And at the end of that play, Nora says, you know, I'm leaving. And she walks out and closes the door. And that's the way it ends. And that happened in a later chapter, for another big spoiler alert, sorry. That happened with Daisy as well. She said, I want a divorce. Yeah, I put this in. Do you remember Diana when she went through her big thing? Her name was Diana Sterling. We looked it up. A starling is, quote, the most successful bird in North America, unquote. It is bold yet wary, plain in color, but glitters due to iridescence, can vocally imitate other birds. So that kind of, I thought, was the perfect name for how Diana, when she was in her career mode, was. Part 4, The Happy Land, nicknamed for Emily Prep School. And there was a section in there I want to ask. How did you feel about the description of climbing Mount Katrina? Remember that one? That's in the yearbook. About half a dozen boys wrote they climbed Mount Katrina. And when Diana actually contacts Katrina, she's horrified, as anybody would be, and said, well, I was going out with this boy, Teddy, from their class. Some of these boys were his friends. I thought they were my friend too. Any comments about that? No? Okay. And the last part is called The Downward Path, where it brings it all together. Oh, thank you.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Kavanaugh hearing. You know, it just kept reminding me of the Kavanaugh hearing whenever they talked about that sort of thing. Like, that's the way we lived. Yeah, we used to drink, we used to carouse, and we had these little shortcut phrases for the girls that we conquered, or wanted to conquer, or whatever level of whatever they thought was conquering.
Problem from becoming two. It didn't stop him from going to the Supreme Court, nor did it stop Clarence Thomas. They had allegations against him. It seems it doesn't stop anybody anymore.
I, as the voice of reason, am cutting all political conversation.
Oh, okay.
Okay. One last thing about that, though. They never mentioned Brett Kavanaugh by name, but of course it's clear who they're talking about. And I thought it was in one of these questions, maybe it was just in my notes. The comment was that the male got to be Supreme Court justice. The female, who was a neuroscientist, had to go into hiding. And this is how they contrast what happens often in those situations. Okay, ready to move on to Daisy. Just read all the questions. We've discussed a lot of them already. Like, how would you describe Daisy in the early part of the book? She lacks confidence, describing herself as short and dumb. She feels others look down on her. Does Hal see her the same way? And how does he describe her to others? Those are the main things. And then what I really liked, Daisy really unloaded to Diana when she first met her. And again, talking about alcohol seems to have a big part in the book in what happens as the boys are growing up, and with the women. And Daisy just had a lot to say to Diana about her life, that she really saw problems with her husband, her daughter, her job, the way others see her. And don't forget, Daisy also had lost her very best friend 9 months before Hannah had died. And Hal had always, anyone
Who was a strong female figure.
that Daisy wanted to be friends with, Hal talked down, and she said, well, maybe I won't. So,
You want to say anything
about Daisy.
She got the nerve to leave him and go on her own and become, was she a waitress or a helper in
And
no.
you're next.
Yeah, at the Abbey, wasn't she? At the Abbey, yeah. That was.
And do you want to say something?
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about Hal before when we were talking about, he's like a lot of men, very, very controlling. In fact, that he wanted her to, like, he didn't encourage her to go back to school. He didn't encourage her to have friends, as we were saying. And just, now it's fortunate he wasn't abusive. Well, in certain ways he was abusive emotionally, but a lot of abusive men are like that. They start out just by, wanting to, they start out being loving, but then they become very controlling. And I think that's the type of person he was. Even if he hadn't raped Diana, he was just that type of person, and not good for her. And he made her feel, I think he helped to make her feel inferior until she finally woke up. Daisy. That's all.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about Daisy with the other questions before we move on? Nope. Yeah, we do. Do you want to read the review for it? The Washington Post review?
Oh. In the Washington Post book review, a compelling, nuanced novel about the long, terrible aftermath of sexual assault and the things that can be stolen from women that can never be fully restored. Weiner seems to steadfastly believe in the saving grace of humor, the ability of time to open up possibilities, and the strength of female friendships. Weiner writes incisively, yet with restraint, about our survivors' incremental process of reclaiming some measure of peace. Anybody want to comment about that? Should I, the questions about Diana, we're going to read them next, right? Yes.
We really haven't said a whole lot about the relationship between Diana and Daisy. And I think you have to think that that relationship came together because Diana and Diana's mother had trusted the doctor, which we haven't talked about at all. The doctor or the professor that worked at the university. And that was a close female relationship. And that's really how Daisy ended up at the Cape, because she took the job as the mother's helper, which started the whole thing. The book started out as trust. And if you recall, when she went to the party, the professor said to her, well, what would your mother say? She didn't know anything about teenage children. She had young children. And, you know, Daisy, who was then Diana, had said that her mother would let her go and tell her to be careful. So I think that as we're thinking of all the things that ended happening in the story, that we have to remember of that involvement, the original relationship between the mother and the professor, who really were two people that worked together, and then the trust with the daughter. And it goes again to the thing of trust and the lack of trust. And how everything that happened later in the story with the professor shows that she showed her guilt, that something happened on her watch that she never knew about, that Daisy hid so many things that could never be taken care of.
Okay. That professor, Dr. Levy, wasn't the only one who noticed that Diana was having trouble. It said that she almost flunked 10th, 11th, and 12th grade for that reason, and everybody commented. Her former soccer coach, her former teachers, even her pediatrician, they all suspected something happened, but they didn't know what. And somebody said something about a broken heart. Well, Diana felt totally broken. She said, I thought the most affecting part was the aftermath of the rape, where Diana is telling that she feels broken, she can't be fixed. You know, she feels it's all her fault, and she just falls apart. But Dr. Levy was the one who did, as you said, gave her the cottage, sort of out of the feeling of guilt. And that was, I think, what helped start her to heal. In the section of Diana, well, another thing, read all those questions, describe the glamorous consultant Diana Starling as we first meet her. What did you think of her when you learned what she did, that she went to so much effort to become the glamorous consultant, to set up the website, to give herself a completely different identity, to confront her attackers? How did you feel about that?
I think it was pretty impressive what she did, but I want to step back for a minute. I understand that women recuperating, if ever, from rape can take a lifetime, if ever, to get over that. I get that. But it really troubled me what Diana did. And I kept saying to myself, is it fair for her to go and do and ruin lives of people who knew nothing about this? I mean, she almost ruined Daisy's life. She, you know, we'll debate whether or not the guy killed himself because of her. And it just troubled me. How much can you go and really try and make somebody atone for something they did to you? Was her plan the best way? Was there another way to do it? And it just bothered me. I was curious what everyone thinks about that. I think Daisy came up with a good solution where she said her husband maybe should go and teach at Emlyn and try and educate these boys about how to be boys, how to be mentions. But I was troubled by what Diana did. I was impressed, but troubled.
Harriet?
I thought she was diabolical. I thought all of that research and finding her way into their lives and I really, she actually, in a way, diabolical, yes, but in another way, respectable.
Sensitive. She was a very bright, sensitive girl whose life had been virtually destroyed. Basically, she was gang raped or raped with witnesses being held down when she was 15 years old. And she didn't know anything about anything. She couldn't talk to anybody, and it felt. She made Daisy aware, maybe more aware of the I think Brad would have destroyed himself. He was destroying himself, whether he would have actually committed suicide at that moment or not. He was destroying himself. That would have, it might have taken a little bit longer.
I think it was interesting that Jennifer Weiner chose this mythology.
Anything else you want to say about Diana at this point? A lot of it is covered in the general questions later. Oh, yeah.
Question 3. Anybody want to comment about question 3? I will. Okay, Diana liked Daisy because she was down to earth and she felt that Hal was oppressing her, that she had a lot of promise, that she was a great cook and she was a good person, a good shimmer. So she was upset and she tried to help. She did help Daisy have a better opinion of self-esteem about herself. And she was very impressed with Beatrice, that she was brave enough and independent enough to do what she wanted. Nobody was going to prevent her from living the life that she wanted to live, which Hal couldn't figure out. He couldn't see that, but that really was the case. Should I read question 1? General questions. Did the publishers do a disservice by touting this novel as a beach read? How would you have read it differently if the description given was more accurate?
I'm sorry, I'm too busy looking there.
Sorry.
I think that calling it a beach read was really touting what the book was trying to not do, which put down women. And it annoyed the hell out of me. I think there was more to this book than what you would expect from a beach read. I don't think the people that put that out think men are reading this on the beach. So I really felt that it was a put down, and there was just too much in this book to call it that. Any of you?
All of Jennifer Weiner's books are called beach reads, and I think that they just automatically do it. I mean, every time I see a Jennifer Weiner, they say it's for your beach read, and I don't think anybody reads it. They just categorize her that way.
Before anybody else goes on, Arlene?
So I had already finished reading the book, and my daughter-in-law told me she was about to begin it, or maybe she had just started it. And I said, it was really a good book. And it's different than some of these books that they call beach reads because it's about a rape. And I think my daughter-in-law had just thought this was going to be a normal, easygoing beach read and had no clue that it was about a rape. And I think it was really a big disservice to the readers as well as Jennifer Weiner, because I think people had a different expectation of it. Once they finished it, they knew it was totally different than a beach read.
If you're a Jennifer Weiner fan, and I am, that is her big campaign, that they categorize her books as chick lit or beach reads and don't take it as seriously as men authors, as Bonnie had said in her introduction. And she really is on the campaign to equate literature that is for women as something other than chick lit and beach reads. So this is no different than any of her other books in terms of how they're promoted.
I think calling it a beach read trivialized a horrific situation and a problem that we are dealing with in our society at this time.
You guys did the research. Did I see someplace that this was the second book of a trilogy? No?
No, there is another one that has a very similar title, but it was, but it wasn't exactly. As far as a beach read, I read somewhere on the internet, Jennifer Weiner's definition of a beach read is a book that's so good and so interesting that no matter where you go, you can't put it down. You have to take it with you. Therefore, even when you're going to the beach, you're going to take this book. So it doesn't mean the usual meaning of a beach read of a fluff. It doesn't mean that. It means an intense book, a really good book with substance. Okay, so what is the effect of the Nash novels, different points of view? Diana Daisy, Beatrice Daisy. What are the steps our survivor needed to heal from this trauma? What are some of the people? What is something about the, how about 3? What are the steps our survivor needed to heal from this trauma? Who were some of the people, or what were some of the events that helped her heal? Sometimes the sorrow was the road not taken would overwhelm her. How did the trauma change her life? How did it change the people who loved her? 3 and Ellen, for you.
I think the major difference is that Hal found a wife that he wanted to mold into what he wanted, and Michael accepted Diana for what she was, and he wasn't judgmental. He was patient. He was a good man, and that was entirely different than Hal. And the people who helped, what was the question? The steps she needed to heal. Reese, the restaurant owner, all those people. Well, first the woman who gave her the cottage, but aside from that, when she developed her career as a waitress, but then she had this whole family of people who worked there who had their own troubles, but they were all there for her.
so, I think he did not really care. He was just so rigid in his feelings toward her, where Michael was absolutely open-minded. He had his heart was open. He was certainly much more caring and loving toward Diana. And Daisy, I think she got a raw deal with him. I mean, pretty much just, he was controlling all the time. He just seemed to be so controlling for every single thing. And, you know, perhaps that had to do with his drinking, but he was so, excuse me, he was so wanting to have everything his way and mold her in those ways to just fit his needs were, whether it was to have the dinner parties at the house and she was cooking and doing things, and you know, and then when he accused that helper, you know, that was awful too. He's just, yes. Mhm. Right.
Diana brought out to me that was when he was drinking, he was more belligerent and more aggressive.
Right. Mhm.
One of the things that I think Jennifer Weiner brought out was the class thing between the two of them, because one of the things Diana had a problem with in accepting Michael was that he was working class. And it's not the way any of them had been brought up. And it turns out that he had a whole lot more class than Hal or any of Hal's buddies.
Sure.
It just occurred to me that all three of the men involved in the rape had very weak self-images. They were all drinkers. Hal recovered to a greater extent than the others from the drinking. But there was a weakness there. And Danny did too. Danny went in a different direction. Danny had other difficulties, but they all had very weak self-images.
I like the way the author just showed the incremental steps taken for the healing of Diana. The first step was to get the cottage. The second step was to get the job at the Abbey, which had been the Church of Safe Harbor, and to meet the other people there, to see that she wasn't the only one who had issues, although the others had very different issues. Yeah. Another, which I thought was interesting, was to get a dog, to get a rescue dog, to rescue a dog from the shelter. I think her name was Wilma, something like that, where the dog was trembling in the back of the cage, and she said, "I'll take this one." And she gave the dog a little food in the cage, and the dog took a little bit and put the food under the rug at the bottom of the cage. When she brought the dog home, the dog took a little food and put it under the coffee table. I mean, you felt so bad. I said, the people at the shelter said, the dog was found alone on the beach at the end of the summer. So the question was the dog dumped? Was the dog lost? Or did the dog run away? So the dog also represented her. Daisy also had a dog, 15-year-old Lester, who had digestive problems. And the author actually had or has a dog as well. So I just thought that was a little interesting step. Of course, Michael was a big step in her recovery as well, step by step by step. It wasn't like some books have it, oh, they met the guy and everything is perfect. No, nothing is. She happened where it all kicked up again was when she saw the wedding photograph in one of the cottages that her husband Michael was cottage, probably a mansion that her husband Michael was caretaker of, and she saw the wedding photo and said that was Bo. add a name at the bottom. So that's the first time she knew his real name. I don't remember. Does anyone remember how he got the name Poe?
Oh, I agree.
Grandpa.
He had cited a verse from Edgar Allan Poe. And from then on, they called him Poe.
They all had alternate names.
Yeah.
Which was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, no, we all kept our own names. None of us had like, no, you all had pet names. But to me, that was, as soon as I saw that they all had pseudo names, I said, oh, this is not a good group of kids. They're out for no good. So that, to me, that was a red light right off. Anybody else want to comment about anything? Are we ready to rate the book?
The last one, general questions number 6, you want to read that?
Diana describes a world where being born female meant spending years of your life at risk, and the rest of it invisible, existing as prey, or barely existing at all. What were some of the viewpoints given of the Me Too movement? Hal and Vernon, Daisy's mom, Judy, Beatrice, Beatrice's friend, Cade, the girl at Cade's lunch table, and the older brother.
You want to say something? No? Okay. We added something after it was typed up. And did a person's generation, what generation they were, make a difference in their comments? And their viewpoint. I'll just pick one. The girl at Cade's lunch table. When Beatrice at the lunch table said that she had written the word rapist, and that's why she was expelled from her last prep school. One of the girls there said, well, I have an older brother, and you can't accuse somebody because it's not fair to the boy, because it may or may not be true. So there are different. That was her viewpoint. That's what I liked about the author. She really did try to get lots of it in. Okay, let's talk older generation. There was Vernon, who was Hal's misogynist father. And there was Judy, who was Daisy's mother, who, what do you want to say about the two of them for starters?
All three of the older women were involved with husbands or employers that chased them, so to speak, around the desk. They were all three in that position. So obviously they weren't happy about it, and they had, I guess, good outcomes because they married these men and at least they had a comfortable life. But no, but they were all in that situation.
Harriet wants to say something.
I don't know if I remember what I was going to say, but anyhow, I think, I think pretty much the generational difference really continues when it comes to guys. The men or young men aren't told enough about what's right and what's not right about how to treat females. And this is going to be continuing if people excuse them by saying, well, if my brother was accused of something and he actually didn't commit something, in other words, wrongfully accused. If you put yourself in situations, it's sort of like Diana, when she was 15, going off and being a mother's helper. She was given a bathing suit, a beautiful yellow bikini, and it made her feel fantastic. And it made her identify with her body and wanting, maybe to experience a little bit of life. And everyone talked about that too. Go ahead and enjoy being a woman or a young woman. And she really didn't know enough or wasn't mature enough to know the difference at 15 to where the lines should be and how you protect yourself. I mean, she was warned not to drink when she goes on the beach, but she took the drinks anyhow.
She didn't know that there was alcohol in it because he put fruit juice in there, and supposedly that killed the taste of the alcohol. She would
Yeah.
not have taken it. She did know enough not to drink any alcohol.
But they're
he
older
tricked her.
boys. They're older boys.
They're
and
older
she
boys.
wasn't warned about older boys.
Right.
That kind of thing. It's not a matter of like pointing this person's at fault, but I think preparing, if we're thinking about, personalizing the book, preparing our kids, whether they're guys or they're girls, to know, how some situations can be very difficult and you're not always in control. So, you might want to be on guard a little bit. Enjoy, but be on guard.
That's the point, I think. The mothers usually prepare, quote unquote, the girls, warn them. But I know my mother did, and she was a newfangled mother in an older generation. But she did tell my brothers, she did hammer away. You don't do this. You don't do that. You make sure she knows what's going on. There's no liquor involved. And they towed the line. I mean, they may have gotten some action, but those girls knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
And so Diana was fascinated at 15. She was fascinated by the au pairs that came from other countries and the freedom that they seemed to have with their bodies. And it was something very new for her and probably fascinating to her, I imagine, from the story. So she kind of like, well, I want to be part of that. Everybody encouraged me. They gave me this yellow bathing suit. I mean, it's like, but nobody prepared her for all of that.
Wow. Also, it did mention, and Hal had his own chapter, his one chapter toward the end of the book, and it wasn't, he rationalized it all away, but it made him sound worse and worse. His comment was that he didn't really like Diana, but he saw her as useful because his goal that summer was to have the 23 odd, about that many boys from his graduating class who were distributed in houses around the Cape. His goal had been to have no man left standing. He wanted them all to have sex before they went, before the summer ended, and he saw Diana as a perfect candidate. So, you did have that. That was one comment. The other I wanted to ask that we added after this was printed, this is the adult Diana, did Diana's feelings about her attackers change over time? Or what she was doing at that those last steps? How do you feel about all that? Did her feelings change about her attackers or from what she had before? It would have to over time. Go ahead,
Eileen. I don't think they changed towards the attacker. I think she learned to handle it. But I don't think there was ever forgiveness, nor do I think that there needed to be. I think in that kind of situation, you learn to deal or you don't. And the healthy thing is to learn to deal, which she finally did, with Daisy's help. And That's it. All right. Who else?
I think she thought that everybody that was associated with them were going to be bad or deceitful. And I think that the relationship with Daisy and her daughter showed her that there were some good people that were surrounding the bad people. I think it gave her not necessarily forgiveness, but it gave her a different outlook on some of the people.
I think she regretted the impact on some of the innocent bystanders. I felt that. As far as the rapists, not particularly.
The very last part, just the stars, we really finished it. I'm really impressed. The last two with the stars were questions given by one of the reader's guides. And as such, I don't think they really have answers, or they are answers that can go on and on forever. It says, the novel deals with complex questions. Who needs to be held responsible for assaults? And what does it mean to be a bystander? What actions are considered irredeemable? And how has the internet affected the answer to this question?
How does the internet?
Internet. The last question was really part of this as well. Think about if you want to say something, but again, I don't think there are really definitive answers here. How severely should actions be punished, and should they be forgiven? Does the novel offer a definitive conclusion about who should be punished? And how do the characters of Brad, Danny, and Daisy complicate this question? Anyone want to comment on those things? Or on anything we haven't covered? Sure.
12:30, and I'd like to start with people that are still faithfully on my Zoom screen. So, Arlene, you're number one.
Well, I really liked the book. I always liked Jennifer Weiner books, and I found this one to be very compelling and interesting and thought-provoking. I forget how high we're supposed to rate, but I think up to 10. So I would probably give this a 9. I thought it was a very good book and left a lot of things for people to discuss and think about.
Enid.
I didn't quite finish. I probably have another 50 pages, but I really, really enjoyed it. I would give it a 9.
Thank you, and hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Harriet.
I would give it a 7 because I'm not a huge fan of Jennifer Weiner. I did love In Her Shoes way back, but I love that. But this was not bad. Sorry, not bad.
Okay, Marcia.
A 7.
Marcia.
I would give it an 8. I thought it was a very interesting read. I also objected to it being called a beach read, and that was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting it to be about rape. And but it was interesting, and I thought the discussion this morning was fabulous.
Always is.
And
yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I do like her books, the ones I've read. And I didn't want to put it down. I remember when I first got it, I thought, oh, it's over 400 pages, but it took me less time to read than some that are about, 270 or whatever. But I just know, I've known some people, unfortunately, not who were raped, but I said, who were controlling in my lifetime. And I felt sorry for Daisy at the same time wanting to yell at her to say, hey, you got to do something about this situation. but I really enjoyed it a lot, and I would give it a 9 or a 9.5.
Thank you. Linda?
I'd give it an 8. I think I've read most of her books, and I didn't know what this was going to, again, with the rape, but I don't know, it just seemed to me, and I know people heal at different, different times, whatever, but I just felt sorry for Diana, how long it took her to, I'm going to say, get better or overcome. And I think that to me was part of a downer in the book. It just seemed like, not that you instantly get better, but it just took an enormous amount of time for her to find her way.
Thank you. Nancy?
Hi. I thought it was just a beach read. I mean, I whipped through it. I enjoyed it, as I do enjoy Jennifer Weiner books. But I have to say, as soon as I got the book club questions and then having the discussion that Diana and Bonnie led, it really brought so much more out in that book than I had seen when I breezed through it. The discussion was great, girls. You did a really good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we're one? Okay, I'll go first. I give it a 10. I thought it was a marvelous book. I enjoyed it very much. We didn't answer the question, did Daisy take Hal back? I don't think she did either. And how severe, I was thinking about this, how severely should a rapist be punished? And I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's easy if it's something that's a repetitive offense. I mean, you don't have to really think about it, but a one-time shot. Now, you don't know from the book itself whether this was Hal's only time. And if you think about his personality, I would think it was not. And therefore, I would say that he, yes, should be severely punished. He should at least have to do something, go out and talk about the situation with other men and go for counseling himself. You want to go next?
Okay, I'd say an 8 or a 9. I got the feeling that she was on deadline and because it felt like it wasn't edited to me as well as it should have. I also caught some discrepancies in the book that some of the reviewers had mentioned. And when I read the book the second time, I said, oh yeah, this now jumps out at me. So I just, well, I missed them the first time, but not the second. Some of the dates don't match. Some of Daisy's sophomore college apartment mates called her Daisy when she didn't get that name till a year later, stuff like that. But I thought it was a very good book, but it should have been marketed differently.
I would give it an 8. I enjoyed reading it. It's not the kind of book that I would normally, read. I usually don't like reading about, women's interactions and things like that. But I enjoyed reading the book.
I'd give it an 8. I think the characters gave you a lot to think about, and no, I enjoyed it. And thank you so much. The questions were amazing.
I would, excuse me, I would give it a 9. I think it was the development of the characters I thought was really good. You did a fantastic job with the questions and much appreciated. It was thought-provoking. I don't know if it all follows what a rape case would be like, but some of the facts felt a little skewed, or just that they weren't, I don't know if really Diana, if that's her responses and reactions were the way that you would think that they would show, like the way she act toward Hal, the way that she realize what was going on, or the way she took Daisy in. Some of that was a little strange, I think, but I still enjoyed the book and I would give it a 9.
If we can do middle digit, I've given 8.5. I definitely enjoyed the book and I like Jennifer Weiner's books. I think it's an important book for us to read to keep the Me Too movement alive and kicking so we don't keep forgetting.
Pass. I do not read her books. It sounds to me from the discussion, thank you, it was wonderful, that this may be a little above some of the others, but she is not my type of author.
Who's that?
Well, I've been the bad one this month. I had 2 other book clubs, so I couldn't get to this book. But I do like Jennifer Weiner. I've seen her speak in person several years ago, and she was just great. So I will definitely put this one on my list. And thank you for a great discussion, everybody.
Okay. I want to thank you for the fabulous presentation, all of the hard work you put into this, and the background information and all the things that you tied in. Just a superb job. Thank you. I think this should be required reading for a lot of teenage boys because it highlights how devastating rape can be and what it can do to a young woman. And it also highlights how naive many young girls are. And I have to say that my mother did not prepare me. I was clueless. She never told me if you go to, and I used to go with my girlfriends to Penn fraternity parties. My mother never said, don't drink the punch. Don't do this, don't do that. She didn't give me any of these guidelines. By the grace of God, I'm fine, nothing happens. So I know I have some angels watching out for me. I love the diversity of the characters and the many stories within the big story. And I like the way it was all pulled together, tied together. I would give it a 9. When I first read the book, I didn't do what I typically do. I didn't read about the story first. So I didn't know where it was going. So I was along for the ride, and I'm glad I read it.
I think it was a very interesting story and an important story told well. Suffice it to say, most of you know I've just moved. And I had said to Diana, I think it was a little bit over a week ago, well, I'll be coming to this meeting, but I will not have read the book. Now, the book came through in the library just about a week ago today. I sat down and thought, well, I'll look at it. And I mean, the floor was covered with boxes at that point. And I just sat there and read the book until I finished the book a day later. I mean, it was very well told. I think her characters, for the most part, were not fully developed. That would be my criticism of the story. But she took important issues and dealt with them in a way that makes an impression on people. I would give it an 8.
I would also give it an 8. I thought it was a good book for discussion. I also don't think it should have been marketed as only as a beach read. It should be almost on a list for when you see the list of books for book clubs, because there's a lot in this to be discussed. And the questions were absolutely wonderful that you had.
I'll give it a 7. I usually do not like writing. I did enjoy the discussion. Very good question. That's about it.
I give it a 7 or 8. I'm not a Jennifer Weiner fan either. To me, the ending was left very up in the air. What's going to happen to these people? To me, it was abrupt.
I would give it an 8. I thought the book was
good. Again, it should not have been should not be a beach read, because I think it is important for people to read this. I think that the subject matter, she did deal with it in certain ways. In certain ways, I didn't agree with the way she was dealing with it, but I still found the story very interesting. I am a Jennifer Weiner fan. I like the way that she writes relationships between women. I think that's her strong point. Her character development, I think, also is done very well, and I would give it a 9.
So I would give it an 8, and it's interesting to me because none of you have mentioned this, but my was I would okay, it's gonna make me drink. If you wanted to bring a snack, but we need to see a card that you have been vaccinated. And I would hope that every single one of you sitting here, so I don't have to give you my spiel, is. You would have to still be masked as you're walking around and whatnot in the synagogue. Like, God forbid any of you take off your mask when you exit, we can get into trouble. So I'm begging you to keep it on until you are in the parking lot. But I wanted you to be aware that Tuesday meetings now will be back to starting at 12, and that for the time being, we're not going to order food because we have to kind of see how things go. So you can bring your own lunch and drink and whatever. Are there any questions about that? So the meeting will be, not the meeting, lunch will be 12-ish or whenever you get there. The meeting will probably start at 12:30 for those not interested, and then the program will follow that. No, on book club still is 11. I'm simply saying if you wanted to bring a snack. But for the Tuesday meetings, they will be starting, again, lunch will be starting around 12-ish. And whenever you get there, meeting around 12:30, and then program to follow. And Margie does have wonderful programs set up. The last one was really good. So, any questions? Okay, well.
Love your book discussion, because I know both of, no, I know the way both of you read a book and discuss it, but for me, I have spiel is, I think we should keep book club to a time frame.
Well, we do. It's an hour and a half.
Yeah, we try to keep it to an hour and a half.
And the really funny thing is, and I have no idea why, but my COVID shot just came up on my watch, which is really strange. It's like my watch is listening to me. I think I'm, whoa. Anyway, you're here. Thank you. You both did a great job. I love the discussions. Oh, yeah. And